Hi, this is Lauren Randolph with My Hotel Wedding, and I'm back for our weekly happy hour. We missed you last week, but we're back here again. I hope you have your glass of wine. I have mine. I'm going with a red tonight, a nice cab. And tonight I'm here to talk to you about your wedding planning timeline and some of the details of that. It's one of those things that's really funny. I have friends constantly asking me that they don't know where to start and where should they start when it comes to the wedding planning process. You're newly engaged, it's really exciting, but then if you're planning to have a wedding, it's time to get down to the nitty-gritty and start planning your wedding. And as a planner, I often forget because I'm so used to going through the process, checking off vendors and boxes and everything that we need to get done, that I forget that for everyone else, sometimes it can be confusing as to where to start and what to do when. So I wanted to create this quick YouTube video to really highlight, I think, some of the most important things that you should start planning and really start with once you actually are engaged. So, one more thing too, if you're watching this on YouTube, feel free to leave any questions there along the way. I get them on my phone, so I'll be happy to answer any questions that you put there, as well as I'll reply to them on the YouTube page in case I miss them during this happy hour. So let's dig into this. One of the first things I want to tell everybody too, all our brides and grooms out there, is you can plan a wedding in 2 years, you can plan a wedding in 1 year, you can plan a wedding in 3 to 6 months or even less. So don't feel discouraged or stressed out if you are recently engaged and you're planning a really quick turnaround or you have a lot of time. These are still things that I'll get into. Some of the action items that should be on your planning timeline should be done no matter where you are in the process or how soon you have before you're saying I do. So for people, I think, get stressed out very easily if they're planning a short-term wedding, but no, it can be done. And many times in my career, I have planned events 3 months out with 2 weeks notice. So no, anything is possible and can be done, especially if you have the resources to do so. So you just want to make sure you do have that if you're planning a 1 month wedding, that you have the time and energy to put into actually making it happen. So one of the first things after you've gotten engaged, actually the very first thing, I should back up, is to take some time to be engaged. I think so often couples rush from the engagement into the wedding planning. So before you get into the process of planning, take a beat, sit back, and just be engaged, because you're only engaged for so long before you're husband and wife, you're married, and as my husband likes to say, he's no longer special because he's married like everybody else. He got much more attention being a fiance. So take some time to just enjoy being a fiance for a little bit, and then it's time to get down to your planning if you're planning to have a wedding. So one of the first steps that you want to do after talking to your family and your partner about your budget is to start putting together your guest list. So it's important to start with your guest list because you really don't know what kind of venue you can book and what kind and how to allocate your budget until you have an idea of how many people will be attending your wedding. So that's one of the first things. You'll want to sit down with your fiance, your partner, your parents-in-law, and just put together that list. So you really have a solid idea of how many people and budget, and you can kind of start to go from there. The next thing you'll want to do in the process is finding your venue. This is really important and really should be one of the first things you do in your wedding planning, because finding your venue, or we at My Hotel Wedding say finding your hotel, is so important because it really dictates your budget and your feel of your entire day. So the venue and the catering is always going to be the largest part of your budget. So until you kind of know what you're working with in terms of pricing there, you can't allocate pricing for everything else on your planning timeline and everything else that has to do with your wedding day. So as soon as you get engaged, if you know you have your heart set on one of the most popular hotels in town and they book a year out, they're a waiting list, then you probably want to give yourself a couple years to plan, and you want to go after the venue as soon as possible, as soon as you're over that little honeymoon engagement time that I talked about. So that should always be the first step in your planning timeline, is really finding that right venue or hotel for your wedding day. And if you need help finding that, you can join us at myhotelwedding.com, and we'll help you search for venues and receive free quotes from hotels for your wedding day, so you can compare side by side to see what's the best deal for you. Next, after that, this is for my brides out there, you want to start looking for the dress. So once you have your venue and your date in place, that really dictates the style of your bridal gown and dress. And if you're not buying a dress off the rack, you need to give a lot of time for that dress to be made, especially depending on whether it's lace or beaded or the details, whether it's being locally made here in the United States or in Asia. They need time to make that dress. And depending on how difficult it is, it could be anywhere from 1 month to 2 months to 8 months to 6 months. So start dress shopping as soon as you have that venue down, because you don't want to be caught off guard because you kept putting it off, and then you're paying for a rush order for your wedding dress and paying fees that you didn't have to pay in the first place. And another reason why the wedding dress is so important in this process to do early on is because most likely you'll have multiple fittings, and you need to give yourself time to have those multiple fittings. A lot of brides fluctuate in weight, and so you want to make sure that you're giving the bridal designer and your seamstresses enough time to really fit that dress perfectly to your body, because honestly, more than anything, that dress fitting is what makes the wedding dress yours. Another thing that we kind of covered when finding your venue is to find a date. And as you're looking and narrowing in on different wedding dates, you'll want to take a moment to check in with your closest family and friends that you know that you want to be at your wedding day more than anything. And you want to make sure that those dates work with their schedule, especially if you have a couple of different choices in mind. Now, if it's like, this is the date, I don't care, whoever makes it, then by all means disregard what I've just said. But I just like to highlight that because sometimes people get upset that, like, I booked this wedding date and this person's gone and can't be there. And if it's that important to you, you want to kind of float around different dates with your closest, nearest, and dearest to make sure that they can actually be present on that day. Other highlights, I get this asked a lot through the website and other people out there. When do I send the save the dates, and when do I send my invitations? So you want to send the save the dates about 6 months prior to your wedding. And if you're having a destination wedding and you already know the location, or at least the country or the city, send out your save the date a year in advance, if not more, because people need time to make travel plans, babysitting plans, nanny plans, whatever it is. The more time you can give them, the better for them to kind of save or allocate resources to coming to your destination wedding. So it's about 6 months out for your save the date, and then invites should go out anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks prior to your wedding date. And I always like to highlight this to couples because they're like, oh, great, I have 6 to 8 weeks to send out my wedding invites, but oftentimes it's easy to forget that there's also a production time. If you're doing a printed invite, depending on whether you're doing something custom, letterpress, you're ordering online, you have to back up from that date of 6 to 8 weeks to give enough time for production, which could be 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or more. And if you're doing calligraphy on the invitations, you need to back up more time for the calligrapher to do all of the calligraphy. And then if you're putting your invitation together and you have different pieces and it takes time, you also have to factor in that time. So as you're kind of putting together a list of details and items for your wedding day, these are just some of the details that can get overlooked or forgotten if you're not doing this on a day-to-day. So I like to highlight these for couples that are working throughout this process on their own. Another thing that's important is the officiant, of course. If you have a friend, make sure that they get on getting their online officiant certificate and all of that. Make sure they're planning plenty of time to get that done. And as soon as you have dates in mind, when I talk about talking to family and friends, you also want to include your officiant in that discussion if it's important to you as to who that person is. And then as we get into that time, I mean, again, everything depends. If you're planning your wedding 3 months out, you're probably doing all of this within the time span of 1 month. If you have 1 to 2 years, you can spread things out along the way. Once you have the venue, you can move on to the wedding dress. Anywhere from a year to 6 months prior, you can start on finding all of your wedding vendors and contracting with them. And that's another biggie that I wanted to bring up as well, is that contracting your wedding vendors is something you definitely want to do sooner rather than later. And know that wedding planning timelines are kind of these jigsaw puzzles of putting everything together. Like if you know you really want Aunt Sue to be there and she's only available certain days to attend your wedding, and you really want this band, but this band has booked all these other weddings dates, you have to kind of put that puzzle together and fit it for the things that are most important to you when it comes to your wedding and your wedding date and your timeline. So that's just something to keep in mind as you're going through the planning process. And one of the last little hints and details I wanted to share with you in this happy hour today is the tasting, which honestly is, I think, everybody's favorite part of the wedding planning process. Definitely, I come from a world where most of the time the guys don't care about the process, but they care about that tasting. And that is one of their favorite parts of the entire wedding planning process. And that's something I always like to recommend to do about 3 months prior to your event date. So you're sure to be tasting the foods that are in season and are current on whether it's that restaurant, that venue, or that caterer's menu. So you're not tasting a year in advance when menus could change, produce could change, there could be a shortage in something, but you fell in love with that dish and the prices have now changed because of that. So it's something that you want to schedule only a few months out from your wedding day. I did want to share with you guys too. So as I mentioned, we have this really amazing tool on My Hotel Wedding where you can search for hotels for your wedding day. Here's a little screenshot of it. You simply put in the location and you can search for hotels and send them quotes for completely free, and that way you can compare pricing side by side. So you can get competitive quotes from here, and we're doing something special too, that when you do actually take advantage of that tool, I'm going to email you my master wedding planning timeline. And this is something that is just part of our wedding planning e-course. But if you sign up for our site and use our hotel search tool to send your information and get a quote from a hotel, completely commitment-free quote, I'll send you our complete timeline where you see everything is outlined from beginning to end for your wedding day. I'll personally email this to you as something special to just share with people who are tuning in here, which we appreciate you doing as part of our happy hour. And